Hola, hola. My name is Ricardo. I am the host of the Lucha Jovers podcast here in the Voices of Wrestling podcast network. We are a Spanish speaking show dedicated to discussing and analyzing pro wrestling from all across the world. From AW to CMLL, we talk about American wrestling, Japanese wrestling, and of course, Lucha Libre. If something big happened in the pro wrestling world, we will talk about it. So if you know Spanish or have a friend that knows Spanish or want to practice your lucha libre pronunciations, go listen to the Lucha Jovers podcast right here in the Voices of Wrestling podcast network. Nos vemos por ahí.
Hello, everyone. My name is Taylor.
And I'm Kelly.
And we are the co-hosts of Jumping Bomb Audio, the podcast all about Joshi Pro Wrestling here on the Voices of Wrestling podcast network. Every other Monday, we are with you talking about the biggest news in Joshi, along with show reviews, previews, and much, much more.
So if you're new to Joshi or you've been a longtime fan, this is the show for you. We've got something for everyone here. So check us out, Jumping Bomb Audio.
This podcast is a member of the Voices of Wrestling podcasting network. Visit voicesofwrestling.com to hear the rest of our great podcasts, as well as show reviews, columns, opinions, and updates across the world of wrestling.
Welcome back to another episode of The Good, The Bad, and the CM Punk. Yes, we are talking about CM Punk once again. I am your host, Tyler Fornes, and with me, as always, is my co-host, Fred Moreland, here on the Voices of Wrestling podcasting network. Fred, I'm going to start off the show by taking a massive victory lap for myself and a massive victory lap for the Hungee cat, because the Hungee cat is cancer-free.
It's official.
It is a banner week here for the podcast, but it also is for me because I called it. I believe it was last week, the second we saw that Chicago was the day before, or the week before Forbidden Door, that would be the day CM Punk returns to the company. And Dave Meltzer is reporting exactly that in the April 24th edition of the Wrestling Observer newsletter. Well, the newsletter that just dropped
came out today
Friday
on the
21st. The return is scheduled for a June 17th show in Chicago's United Center. Yes, it's the second dance or whatever you want to call it. Look, we get to victory lap this because we called it. More specifically, I called it.
You called it.
Woo, as I'm using a pen to circle a victory lap as Odie is chewing on a toy in celebration as well. Look, it is what it is. And I think where we need to go with this, Fred, is we need to talk about the creation of the Saturday show, which is going to be 2 hours, and it's reportedly going to be called Collision.
Mm-hmm.
And it sounds like, and we don't have anything concrete on this, we can only go by what we know. And Fred, what we know is this: it sounds like, based on reporting, that it's going to be a soft-ish brand split, and that split is likely going to be those who are willing to work with CM Punk and those who aren't. Those who are willing to work with Punk are likely going to be on Collision. Those who don't want to work with Punk are likely going to be on Dynamite. And it raises the question, is Collision going to be treated like an A show? So we were told that with Rampage.
Right.
Ended up being a bunch of bullshit.
Ring of Honor.
Yeah.
Dark Elevation were going to matter. They don't at all. How many episodes of Ring of Honor have you watched so far? Not the pay-per-view, but the actual TV.
I'm going to be honest, with all my work that I've been doing, I've watched 0.
I'm better than you. I've watched 1. I watched the first one, and it wasn't a bad episode or anything, but it felt like what Dark and Dark Elevation should have been for a long time, which is half squashes and half longer matches that have pretty clear winners going into them. But it feels very much like an extended Rampage. I don't know, man. This will be the 5th television show that Tony Khan's booking, if you include the Dark and Dark Elevation, along with Rampage and Dynamite. And then
if he's even booking Dark and Dark Elevation, because if I remember correctly, Like QT Marshall was responsible for a lot of those bookings. Am I
Oh,
right?
well then. I was under the impression that QT was like responsible for bringing in talent, like for the job slots, but I'm not sure about like the actual booking of the shows.
I mean, I've been wrong before. I'll be wrong again. I mean, just ask my wife. But I remember that something about Tony Khan overseeing it, but really giving creative control to somebody else. And I thought that was QT because he was dealing, obviously, with the Nightmare Factory guys and being really responsible for all their training.
That is very possible. I don't know how much the honestly, the amount of attention I pay to Dark and Dark Elevation these days is rather mixed, to say the least. I don't know how much of those spots are going to the Nightmare guys, and just looking over the. Let's look at the last Dark. So we got ourselves Truth Robinson against Pat Buck.
What?
Yeah, Pat Buck.
Okay. This was this Monday's.
Yeah,
Dark
this was this
Elevation?
last Dark. This last Dark Monday.
I need to watch that match. That sounds
Tuesday. Yeah, it's got a 6.0 on the old cage match with a grand total of 5 votes coming in. So
that's pretty good for a Dark Elevation match.
Yeah. Then we got the Renegade Twins against Brittany J and Kia Dream, who I've definitely heard of. Cole Carter, remember him? We need to come up with which group was he fake Sting for? Was that, I'm blanking out now. Who was he the fake Sting for the
It was the Factory.
The Factory. Okay, so we have Sting, NWO Sting, and now Factory Sting against Hunter James. We all know and love. The Iron Savages. So they changed Bear Country's name to Iron Savages, I guess. Bear Country was a great
awesome name.
And now they're just Boulder and Bronson. They're not even Bear Boulder and Bear Bronson. Against the Trust Busters. But like the Trust Busters B team with Jeeves K and Sonny Kiss. Marina Shafir against Dream Girl Ellie. Ariel Levy and Jarrett Diaz against Chora Joel and Rohit Raju. All the stars are out tonight.
I gotta say this. Kelly Harris, the co-host of Jumping Bomb Audio on the same podcast network, does a bit on his other podcast, Panels on Pages, which is comic book podcast, and they do this bit. I don't know if you've seen it, Fred, where it's wrestler or porn star, and Dream Girl Ellie is
that's a good one. That was super challenging one. And then the main event sounds cool as hell, to be honest. Angelico against Christopher Daniels.
That sounds fascinating because Christopher Daniels, obviously, he could move back in his heyday, but he's in his 50s now. And Angelico basically has made a career off of a couple of the flippy-do moves. That sounds like it'd be fun.
I like Angelico. So
he's great to have in your lower card.
Yeah, he's a good job guy. Jobber to the stars, I guess, would be the unkind way to put it. Before we get into the CM Punk talk, because I feel like we're going to talk about it till we die. I didn't realize that starting this podcast would mean that I'd be on the CM Punk drama beat for the rest of my life.
Yes. Look, I was the one who pitched the podcast to you.
This is the monkey's paw finger closing.
You can blame me if you want, Fred, but at the end of the day, whatever.
I'm going to have to train the Hungee cat to bite on command. To play the role of Ace Steel, allegedly. Okay, so first of all, the Hungee cat, cancer-free, 100% not straight edge. She is still fucked up. They doped her up for the administration of the medication and everything, and she's still got like her eyeballs moving in different directions. Basically, they gave her a cute little bandana that said cancer free or cancer survivor or something, but we had to put in the washer immediately upon returning home because it was covered in drool. She's just like 100%.
Yeah, she's drugged up.
She's partying on her own. But yeah, she's doing great. Speaking of partying it up, she at least she celebrated April 20th. I know CM Punk did it. But I have a quick story to tell. I remember that the date reminded me of back in high school. This was like 2002 because I'm old. So we had like Columbine happen, but like school shootings were not a regular occurrence like they are now, sadly. But I grew up like in, relatively speaking, a small town in West Virginia, which they all are at best. But our high school, it wasn't like a big trouble place. The biggest trouble that happened while I was there that I'm aware of is that some rednecks decided to recreate Fight Club behind the pizza place across the street. So one day we get to school and like the teachers are all in a tizzy and no one's really sure why. And it turns out that they thought someone had threatened one of our teachers, who was Mrs. Brady. And I come to find out that it's because someone had spray painted her room number on the outside of the building. And they were all freaked out because, like, this is clearly targeting Mrs. Brady. Someone's going to come after her. And I don't know who exactly did it. And I've always wondered how this conversation went. But I guess someone had to tell this group of adults that 420 was the drug number in 2002, which just the idea of like an administration having absolutely no one aware of that just kind of cracked me up. Anyways, like it was like 25 years after Cheech and Chong. Like, come on, y'all. Anyways, NFL draft. Let's talk about that because I'm going to procrastinate on CM Punk talk some more.
Fire away.
Tyler, is Bryce Young going first overall?
I think so. I haven't looked at the odds, but I think the latest odds I had seen, it was like minus like 10,000 or something. I'll stall and pull up DraftKings as the Hungee dog is playing with this board in my office because we're trying to build some IKEA furniture and there's still just one piece hanging in the office. I don't know why.
Hungee dog, Jim Duggan. Yeah. There we go.
Jim Duggan. Number 1 overall draft pick, Bryce Young, minus 1,600.
That seems likely.
So it's very interesting because Frank Reich has historically liked quarterbacks over the height of 6'3". Bryce Young would be the smallest quarterback ever drafted at 5'10" and 194 pounds. Like Kyler Murray was shorter by just a smidge, but he also weighed 210 pounds and he was built relatively thick. Bryce Young is a slight build.
Yeah.
So it makes the discussion a little more difficult. Odie, stop. You're being a turkey. And look, Bryce Young is my number 3 quarterback in this class. I have the top 3 guys clustered relatively close. Like I have my scales out of 100 and I have like 85 to 90 is like a day 1 starter. 90 to 95 is a Pro Bowler. Above that is, I believe they're all pro caliber players like pretty quickly. CJ Stroud is my number 1 guy at 88.5. Anthony Richardson at 87.9 is my number 2 guy. And then Bryce Young's at 87.1. Like, I like all of these players, but how you project them to the NFL is just different. It's right. I guess it would be like going from NXT to the main roster in WWE. Like, you're successful in this little bubble where you have this. It's an NXT style. It was basically a super indie, right? And you're going to the big boy land, and you're expected to have all these nuances, and you're not doing a lot of these high-end style of matches. You're doing the WWE house style, and there's a really big learning curve and just adjusting and being able to work with creative and all that stuff. Some guys just don't. There isn't that kind of chemistry, and some guys it works really well. Like Kevin Owens has been a Universal Champion. Sami Zayn is probably the most over character in the company right now. But it's not that same way for everybody. Just look at the fall of Johnny Gargano. So when you look at how to project quarterbacks, you try to project things that will translate. You try to project, okay, they can run through progressions well. They have the arm talent to be able to make all the throws consistently. And when you have a guy who's small, you have to create your own passing lane sometimes. And you can't see over guys who are 6'5" protecting you. It's not impossible, but it is a deterrent. And if you have 2 players equal, one is 5'10", one is 6'4", you're taking the guy who's 6'4" because he has advantages. And it's not being sizist. You want to eliminate any potential variables that could impact your team in a negative way. And that is one of the easiest things to do. And Young, I think, is tremendous. He plays like Superman, but he doesn't have the biggest arm. He just has a knack for creating, especially when there's nothing there. But how can he do that in the NFL when everybody's much faster, when the spacing is a lot tighter? Because instead of 18-yard wide hash marks, it's 9. So if you're throwing from the far hash mark in college, you're throwing that ball like 35 yards across to the other sideline. In the NFL, it's almost 10 yards smaller, and the splits are different, and it's going to be harder for him to do some of that creating. How's he going to be within structure? How's he going to be with timing routes when he has to potentially create his own throwing windows? That is difficult. And I don't have those concerns with CJ Stroud, who's almost 6'3". I don't have them with Anthony Richardson, who's built like me, except really athletic and not fat. And pair those things together, like Young's going to go number 1. And I think it's a little weird considering what Frank Reich likes in a quarterback, but I also think he's still really good. So it's hard to complain. I would take Stroud and Richardson first, but I'm not going to belittle anybody for taking Young.
Tyler Fornes, Randy Orton simp, is what I've learned from this. Follow-up question: as a Kentuckian, I am legally required to ask this because I've been told Will Levis is good, but you didn't mention him among your top 3 quarterbacks. I must ask you, why do you hate America?
I don't hate America. I just hate Kentucky. I think that's pretty obvious. Will Levis is my number 4 quarterback, and I have him significantly farther down in my rankings. He graded in the second round at 80.8. And one of the reasons with Levis is you don't really know what you're going to get. So my comparison for Will Levis is Kirk Cousins with the ability to make throws like Josh Allen.
Oh, okay. That's
he's got a big boy arm, but he kind of has some of the same things with Kirk. When in rhythm, really good, accurate. He kind of sinks under pressure a little bit. So pressures mean more than sacks because it impacts the quarterback, but you also don't want to be able to convert pressures to sacks. That's an issue. As the Hungee dog has my shoe upstairs. He doesn't ever grab shoes. This is really weird, but anyways, so a good number for pressure to sack conversion is about 15%. So 15% of your pressures end up in sacks. It's 1 out of every 6 2/3 pressures. That sounds about right.
Sure.
Will Levis is at 26%. And contextualizing that is difficult because the offensive line is terrible. This past year, the offense was really bad as far as design. And then on the other hand, you have his receiving talent, and there was like nobody there.
Exactly.
So watching Levis, he shows the ability to handle pressure well. He also collapses. But if he gets in a good system in the NFL with capable weapons, with a capable offensive line and a capable offensive scheme, I'm not even asking for good to great. I'm just saying capable. Give me average. What is Will Levis's baseline? I really don't know. And that to me is what makes him such a difficult evaluation. He can make incredible throws. He can do a lot of these immaculate things, but then he just becomes a damn turtle, goes into his shell, and he's kind of bad at once every so often. So I don't know what to think of him. I don't know how to project him. He's the highest variance guy in the class. I don't know how he's going to come out of this. And to me, that's the scariest thing. I see a bigger path with guys like Stroud, Young, and Richardson. Some people say, oh, he can just run an NFL offense. He did pro-style stuff in college. That's a high floor guy. No, a high floor guy to me, and somebody said this a couple weeks ago, and it completely changed my thinking. The guy that has the high elite traits has the higher floor, because even if they're inconsistent, they can do incredible things. And if you can, even if you deal with some of the crap, if you do something incredible every so often, that balances it out pretty well, doesn't it? Like, if you like, oh, I throw like an extra 5 interceptions a year, but then I'll throw 5 more deep balls for touchdowns. Yeah, you may take that. That trade-off sounds interesting. So I'm really not sure what to think of Will Levis just because of that. And I wouldn't be mad if the Vikings took him at 23, but I don't know what his true ceiling is. And to me, that is the very intriguing element that I have no clue. And if you don't know, it's really tough to like contextualize and convince yourself, hey, this is a first round guy.
I have two more questions, and then I'll drop the subject because this is a wrestling podcast, presumptively. First of all, I obviously quarterback is the most important position in the NFL these days.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that that teams are that basically they're reaching for quarterbacks in the first round, especially now, beyond like the top prospects? Again, do you even think the top prospects are kind of getting looked at too high? Like, should Bryce Young really be the number one pick in this draft kind of situation in a world where, like, you know, Carolina is taking a longer view for their franchise?
So this is a very complex answer, and I'm going to kind of break it down like this. Quarterback is the most valuable position in football.
Exactly.
And when you're in a salary cap league, like in baseball, you'd love to have an ace pitcher. You don't need one. Like an ace pitcher only throws every 5 days. If you have like 3 number 2 pitchers at the top of your rotation, you feel pretty good about that. And you're paying those guys probably maybe $10 million more than you'd pay one singular ace, because you can probably get 3 number 2s for like $15 million a year, where Clayton Kershaw is costing you 30 to 35. And it's kind of like the cost benefit of having a rookie quarterback. If you have a rookie quarterback that you take it number 1 overall, you're paying that guy an average, like your average annual value is about $10.5 million. Whereas the average annual value now for Jalen Hurts is 51. That's where like you can adjust to things, and that cost benefit, it's trying to find surplus value. So quarterbacks go higher because of that, because they are the most important position. I'll tell you my big board, and I'll say this: the only guys out of the top players I haven't watched are the offensive linemen, because the Vikings don't need them, and I have a limited amount of time. I would project in my top 10, 1 or 2 offensive linemen would make it, but CJ Stroud's my number 2 overall player. Anthony Richardson's my number 6. Bryce Young is my number 10. And then you go down to Will Levis. If I can find him, Will Levis is number 40. So I don't grade based off positional value. I just grade based off the talent of player. So taking CJ Stroud at number 1 to me isn't egregious. To me, taking Anthony Richardson at 1 would be a little bit more far-fetched. And I think Bryce Young, based on how I have just my board based on overall talent, I think would be more so. But I also understand people like Bryce Young more than me. Like Dane Brugler from The Athletic, who does The Beast every year, which is like 280,000 words about prospects. Like, it's insane how much detail is in there. High recommend. That's alone is worth The Athletic subscription. You look at that, and he's got Bryce Young number 1 overall. Like, best player in the draft. Like, there's variance, and like I don't necessarily begrudge anybody who wants to take Bryce Young number 1 overall. It's just not something I would personally do, because I value Stroud and Richardson higher. But if you were just to draft based on how good the player is, Jalen Carter goes number 1 overall, because I think he's the best player in this class, and I don't think it's that close.
Defensive tackle for Georgia, right?
Yes, defensive tackle for Georgia. But he's got off the field issues, which are very complicated, and I'm not going to dive into them because I just genuinely don't know. But quarterbacks do get pushed up the board. I don't think any of the top 3 will get pushed up. They may go like a couple spots higher. And like, look, if you have the guy rated at 5th overall in the class and he goes 2, like that's a decent disparity, but it's not like end of the world, because my number 1 overall is 88.7 grade. My number 5 is 88.2. It's not like they're super far as like overall talent, but you're right. Quarterbacks get pushed up, and it's because you can capitalize on a rookie deal.
Fair enough. Last question, although I would love to ask you about Stetson Bennett, just because I think he's hilarious. Bijan Robinson, and I hope I'm saying his first name right. I watched absolutely 0 Texas games this past year. Looks like he's getting talked about as the best running back prospect since Saquon Barkley, and he's currently number 2 on ESPN's big board as far as talent. where's he going to get drafted, and is he going to be like a high first rounder? And is that a good idea in terms of how running backs are used in the NFL these days?
Oh, this is fun. This is really fun. I don't really know how to contextualize it in wrestling terms, so I'm going to say it like this, Fred. He is on my board the number 4 overall player. I love Bijan Robinson. He can do literally everything. If you wanted to make him a slot receiver, you can do that. And he's that good. There's a play against Alabama earlier this year where he ran a wheel route. Where, for those who don't know, he's in the backfield. He kind of angles to the outside and then cuts it straight up the sideline. And it almost looks like a J in the route that he runs. But he's running straight up the sideline. The ball's thrown behind him. So he has to stop, plant, and like jump behind and turn around and catch the football. Just phenomenal stuff. Like, you don't see that from running backs. Hell, sometimes you don't see that from receivers. And he is the closest thing we've seen to Christian McCaffrey as far as being that true dual threat where you can actually count on him to be a true wide receiver and you'd feel pretty comfortable with it. The surplus value for running backs just is not there. It's not. And I can understand.
This has been an ongoing issue for at least a decade.
Yeah. It's because you can get a really talented starting running back in round 4, round 5. Like James Robinson for the Jaguars a couple years ago, undrafted free agent, ran for 1,000 yards his rookie year. Like, you're not going to have elite player in the backfield, but you can get really good without investing a lot of capital. And that's why there's the phrase running backs don't matter. Some teams will still prioritize a really good back highly, and it can pay dividends. But if you're drafting Bijan Robinson in the top 10, he's already going to be like a top 5 paid running back in football as a rookie. Like, this is where in a salary cap era, the surplus value is a big deal, and why running backs get pushed down. Why take Bijan Robinson and pay him a top 5 running back salary in round 1 when I can get Zach Charbonnet at the end of round 2, get probably close-ish production, while even though Charbonnet is not nearly as talented or as explosive, but I'm paying a lot less in draft capital and salary commitment, because instead of giving Bijan Robinson like $8.5, $9 million a year, I'm going to give Zach Charbonnet like $2 million. And that's where the major difference is. And for me, it's fascinating because Bijan is a top 5 player in this class. I genuinely don't know where I'd take him. I really don't. It's a really tough one. NFL general managers a lot of times don't care about the positional value thing. I think Bijan goes top 10, and if I had to guess, it's Atlanta.
Interesting. All right, well, thank you, Tyler Fornes. This is why you should listen to him about the NFL. I think we've procrastinated.
Link is in the description.
Yeah. Put your plugs in here since you just did all that stuff. Like, seriously.
Absolutely. I am the managing editor for USA Today's Vikings Wire. I have my own YouTube channel called Vikings First and Skol, where we do a lot. It's mainly Vikings centric, but we talk a lot of NFL draft. And if you're fans of other teams, you can take that information, and even though we do it with a Vikings slant, you're still going to learn a lot about prospects, and you're still going to be able to utilize that for your own favorite teams. And then I have a new show starting next week on the Purple Daily YouTube and podcast feed, where I'm teaming up with another NFL draft expert to talk NFL draft all year. And it's going to be a lot of fun. Once that comes out, you'll be able to see that on my Twitter feed, but I'm only going to give that nugget away for right now. But yeah, it's the NFL draft is the best time of year. This is the comparison for the NFL draft, in my opinion, would be WrestleMania weekend. Just the excitement, the good times, the like holy crap nature of the whole thing. It's incredible. I cannot freaking wait. It's the podcast. I may not be on the show next week, just a heads up, because of the NFL draft. I'm going to see how much work I can get done and set myself up so I can spend 2 hours with the podcast on Thursday, because Thursday is day 1 of the draft. But we're going to have a good time regardless. And I am really excited for this whole process. You know what I'm not excited for, Fred? Talk
What are
about
you?
CM Punk.
Let's do it, baby. All right, so we've already covered a little bit of this, but I wanted to get your stuff in. I wanted to talk Huggy Cat and my stupid 420 story. But yeah, so Collision is going to be the second, the third AEW in-ring TV show, along with Rampage and Dynamite. It's probably going to be slotted higher than Rampage immediately. It is reported to be a 2-hour show that will be airing on Saturdays. The name Collision is not confirmed. We're kind of working off the assumption that that's what it will be based off I believe it was a copyright or trademark filing. I always get those two confused because I am not a lawyer or particularly smart. Yeah, so, there's kind of a lot of questions about just how much CM Punk matters to the creation of this show. There's some reports that Dave Meltzer's heard that basically he was the key reason, like his return was why they got the show. Others have kind of pushed against that, so to be seen. Or maybe we'll never find out what that is exactly. We still have the split roster rumors, but I think it will basically be, do you want to be around CM Punk or not? There is the report from this week's Observer that CM Punk was told to not contact the Elite. So, fantastic. That's always a good situation. I think basically, just coming down to why they're doing it, they have millions of reasons. And that's Monet, not Mercedes Monet, but Monet, as to why they want CM Punk back. And that's this TV show and the extra money they're going to be getting off of it. We don't have any hard numbers as far as what they're getting paid in this deal. Hopefully we would get that in the near future, but Meltzer did report that currently Warner Brothers Discovery is paying about $500,000 per hour for first-run television. So if you work off of that, which is where this number is coming from, they would be getting $52 million a year. If I had more time, I would have dug up the details on like what the current deal for Dynamite is paying and kind of projected off of that, but I didn't, so deal. But, still, they are probably going to be getting a solid chunk of change for this TV show, arguably even something that would really redefine what AEW is within the wrestling business right now. Tyler, given these details and all that, do you think that the CM Punk gamble makes sense?
Yes and no. And it makes sense if you make an absolute ass ton of money with CM Punk versus the Elite. If you don't do that, no. I don't think this is a good idea. And here's why. You're like, Tony Khan is the best wrestling booker in America. You can tell he has struggles dealing with personalities. He has struggles dealing with relationships inside the buildings. And as far as just trying to keep drama from happening. Now, how much of that is Tony Khan's fault versus just professional wrestling in general? I don't know. I'm not there. But looking from an outside perspective, Fred, I really struggle to see that, like, I don't know how this is a good idea. You're basically saying, hey, you can do whatever you want. I will bring you back, and then we'll just create a whole new fucking show for you. Like, I understand that CM Punk's different. CM Punk is the antithesis of why All Elite Wrestling exists. Whether anybody wants to admit it or not. Like, that's why his return was such a big deal. That's why you had United Center going bananas for 10 straight minutes when CM Punk came back to professional wrestling. Like, he is why this company is here. But at the end of the day, if you're not going to make money with the people you need to make money with, that's Kenny Omega. That's the Young Bucks. There is this massive program right in front of you. And I have a feeling if there ends up being a true brand split, and they never do this, because I'll tell you what, the time to do it's right now. And if you don't do it, this is going to be the invasion angle. It's going to botch. You're going to blow millions out your ass. They need to figure out how to work together. They need to sit down in a room, and Tony Khan just needs to be like, look, here's the deal. Punk's under contract. He's coming back. I'm going to get some like cops in here and some mediators. Figure this out, because we are going to make money hand over fist by doing this. And if they don't do it, it's going to be a massive mistake, Fred. It really will. And if there's a brand split, it's going to be an even bigger mistake.
Well, on the one hand, they do have the mediators in FTR, so there's that.
Oh no! Hold on. We have to address this. The mediators. Oh, we have neutral parties in FTR. Dax has been blowing so much shit out of his ass, like basically licking CM Punk's feet, and like, there's no way they can be neutral. There's no way. I don't care how good of a relationship they have with the Elite. They are obviously pro CM Punk. You have to bring in somebody completely neutral. You know who the closest thing to neutral would be? Sting and Chris Jericho. Jericho's jaded by CM Punk, but that's because CM Punk was CM Punk in WWE. So you have to bring in the true veterans of the locker room. You know what? Who would be a good one? Dustin Rhodes. Bring in Dustin Rhodes to sit there and mediate. You know he's got to have seen some shit. WCW, WWE, TNA. He's been through the ringer, man. Like, that is a guy, if you like, especially with Dusty being his dad, if he can figure out how to help individuals who don't see eye to eye, it's Dustin Rhodes. Like, FTR being the mediators, the neutral party, fuck that. That's bullshit. Absolutely not.
One of my favorite things as a podcast host is to antagonize my co-host.
Yeah,
real passive aggressively. It is very funny that apparently FTR is being talked about. Now, I don't know which side this is coming from or how much truth there is to it, but FTR is being talked about as a mediating party in the CM Punk, Chris Jericho, Tony Khan meeting that is upcoming, apparently still. We'll see how that works out. I mean, I think, honestly, when you consider that they're getting a new TV deal and they're getting tens of millions of dollars off the back of it, and a important, maybe, I don't know if it's like a critical or a key factor, but an important factor is the return of CM Punk to AEW. I think that's a pretty obvious reason why Tony Khan would try to make that work. Now, you know, fool me once, shame on you. Freak out and try to destroy my company twice, shame on me. We will see how that works out. I think it's a reasonable gamut, or when you or gamble, I should say, when you have these tens of millions of dollars on the line and a seemingly a not insignificant reason you're getting that money is the return of CM Punk. But I think it's just such a dice roll because it's CM Punk for all the reasons we've been talking about for months, going back to what happened at Brawl Out. Speaking of, I don't think I put this in the show notes, but this week Adam Page went on his Instagram and put out a little statement about how, the whole quote about him not, listening to veterans was kind of blown out of proportion. What he was really trying to say was that he does listen to them, but he, just has his preference on how he structures things and everything. But that was one of the big things CM Punk ranted about when he went into his I Work with Children routine way back in June. So yeah, we had all this fun stuff and now it's going to head. I think it's going to be very interesting to see what happens to Collision when it debuts, it's going to be a massive TV show. I know that Tony Khan is going to put together the biggest show he possibly can. The second week will be massive. Third week will be massive. Fourth week will be massive. What will be really telling is what the show is going to look like in 3 months, in 6 months, in 12 months. Because Rampage, it started out hot and it quickly has become what we have today, which is just 4 matches, one of which is a squash and one of which is maybe an extended squash, and 2 good to very good matches where going in, it's obvious who the winner's going to be because they're an upper card star and they're facing a lower card wrestler in a heatless, no real terrible build match for the most part. There's exceptions. There's some storyline advancement, but the storyline advancement is usually with secondary guys. It's not with the Elite or BCC or, any other top star you could think of. Jericho, Chris Jericho. It's like the Acclaimed, who I think could be probably bigger, but that's where they are right now outside the title picture, and 2.0 and Jake Hager. It's the B team of the JAS. Yeah. So.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think structure is just going to be so telling with this new show. I can't remember who said it, but somebody said that they need to just. I think it might have been in our office. Like, this needs to be like Superstars, like Rampage does, and then use it kind of as like a transition show to, like almost like bridge Dynamite to this Collision car like show. And I really like that idea because I think you can get a lot from having Rampage, but you just need to present it in a different light. And if you present it in a different light, I think you can actually do things with it, and especially because you've done so much damage to it. And this wasn't the initial vision for Tony Khan. Everything got demolished with how many injuries he had to deal with, and he basically just kind of, for lack of a better term, gave up on Rampage. I don't necessarily think that's 100% fair, but I just think he kind of threw in the towel and be like, I wanted it to be this, and it's just not, as Odie chews on a bottle in the background so he stops bugging me. He wanted it to be a true A show. It's not. And I think this is his second chance to have his second A show. And I'm very intrigued to see what happens. But I think he's dealing with some burnout right now. Like, Dynamite's kind of not going so well. We're going to talk about that. He's booking so many shows. And then the Jaguars have the NFL draft in 6 days where he's the director of analytics. So he's probably running with his head cut off, and I'm very intrigued to see how this Collision show develops when it actually gets announced and starts. My guess is it's going to start after the commitments for the NHL and NBA playoffs, and so they can kind of coincide with that, because you don't want to start a show and then its second week it's already at a different time. That's just a death sentence.
Who has the NBA finals this year?
Oh, it's always ESPN, ABC.
Okay, cool. Then around that debut point, June 17th, that should be the finals. Yeah, the finals will start on June 1. So either the finals will be over or will be ending right at that time, and that'll be on ABC. So they are out of the window for the NBA to have an effect on them.
Yeah, I am very, very intrigued to see what ends up happening. It's going to be interesting, and we are 40 minutes into the show, and we're going to finally stop talking about that scumbag. So, all right, let's talk about other news, and let's talk about All In, Fred. That we know that on the first day there were over 25,000 pre-sale signups. There are over 50,000 at this point. But I think this is something that needs to be discussed about. Ringside for WWE's Clash of the Castle is 4,500 pounds. And if I remember correctly, the pound to dollar conversion is about 1-to-1 at this point.
I will double check that real quick. Looks like 1 pound sterling is equal to about $1.24 these days.
Oh, it's up to $1.24. Okay.
Yeah.
So 4,500 pounds would be about $5,600. And so ringside for Wembley is going to be significantly cheaper. And I think this could be viewed as a mistake, because the people who pay for ringside are the ones who are going to pay pretty much whatever to get those seats. Only 500 pounds. For ringside, which would be in the neighborhood of $625 American. That seems a little light.
USA.
But I'm very intrigued because I know they'll have some bleachers, like nosebleeds, for inexpensive prices, because they want to get people in the door. AEW's been doing that since the beginning. They know, hey, you know what? If we get people in the door and they enjoy the show, they will end up coming back. And I think that's, for the most part, come to fruition. I still think that they could have put 1,000 pounds for like actual ringside, and I think that they would have sold those out. But look, if they sell out the building and they sell out Wembley, nobody's going to care how much the gate was. It's not even going to matter. But I still think they could have gone higher.
Yeah, to me, the people who are buying those floor seats, especially the front row ones, they're equivalent to the people in the freemium app marketplace. Your games like Marvel Snap, where you can play for free, but there's the options to spend some money for resources within the game, and they have a term for some of those people called whales, who carry most of their business by dropping a lot of money each month for these games. I think AEW and honestly wrestling in general, their front row seats are for the whales in their customer base. And when you look at it that way, the price should be high because that's the group that are willing to pay it. It's kind of amazing that Clash of the Castle, anyone would be willing to spend about $66,000 for one front row seat. Like, that's an absolutely insane amount of money to spend for a ticket to anything, in my mind. But there are people, and obviously there were people that were willing to do that. AEW pricing so far below that is, I think, a surprise. I understand wanting to make sure the building is full, but I really don't think that they were going to price themselves out of the marketplace for the people that would be interested in front row seats at £1,000 or even $1,500. I think that ticket pricing is very interesting these days, in general, specifically, but in general. And it's interesting to me that they are struggling to, or not struggling, I guess I shouldn't say, but they made this decision to go with £500 as the entry point for front row.
Yeah. Look, if it sells out, who cares? But I still think they could have made some more money on that ringside. And, well, we'll see. We'll see how quickly those ringside seats end up going. Mm-hmm. In other news, Commander is all elite, Fred. I think it was just a matter of time. I want your opinion on this. I think Tony Khan might be trying to build up his modern day version of the WCW cruiserweights, because we had talked, there was a lot of conversation when this promotion first started that they were going to do the Chinese acrobats from OWE with Shima and the Strong Hearts coming in and bringing those guys over. That never came to fruition for multiple reasons, mainly the pandemic. And then Joshi. Joshi wrestlers, they have a very hardcore fan base. And if you love Joshi, Jumping Bomb Audio, again, make sure you check those guys out. They have very, very hardcore, passionate fan base, but it's more of a niche thing at this point. And it wasn't something that caught on initially. And albeit Tony Khan could have done a much better job of pushing the Joshi and utilizing them better. But I think he really wants to set apart what these guys are, like something about this promotion. And I feel like it's modern day lucha wrestlers. And now you already have Vikingo, you have Commander, you have Phoenix and Pentagon Jr. You could lump Sammy Guevara into there. It feels like it's just a matter of time before he keeps bringing guys in and kind of creates his own little 1996 WCW luchador group.
Yeah, hopefully he'll book them better than WCW did when it came to incorporating them into the rest of the roster. Because I remember those days and just how, even Rey Mysterio really struggled there, sadly. I think currently, and it's going to change rapidly, it's in the process of changing, but for the longest time, the most underutilized source of talent in the United States was Mexico. Lucha Libre has not gotten a lot of mainstream attention over the past 10 years or so, and they've really built up a strong base of stars there that I'm more surprised WWE hasn't worked on getting. I think, of course, WWE doesn't really understand how to push them. I would point at Alberto Del Rio and Andrade Almas as key examples of that. But it makes a lot of sense that Tony Khan is moving to get these stars. And of course, I think he's chosen two great options in Commander, and I think he is working on, if not outright securing him as an exclusive, doing some kind of deal like Ray Phoenix and Penta, where it's a split between AEW and AAA with Hijo del Vikingo. Vikingo is, I think, in my estimation, one of the best wrestlers in the world right now. I easily top 50, probably top 30. And I think he's a fantastic ad for the division for AEW because he's just such a unique talent. And I think Commander has a lot of potential and a lot of skills that he's been able to really show out. But I also think that we're going to rapidly mine the top stars of Mexico with Dragon Lee jumping to NXT. And of course, Penta and Ray Phoenix already being stars in AEW, where you're really getting down to lesser level tiers. And I think Psycho Clown's really good at what he does. But the question is just how does he fit into the American landscape? And is he going to be able to do the stuff that makes him good? And then you got the CMLL guys. And I don't know if they have, honestly, a true breakout star under the age of 30 poised for, to make that jump to a major league American company anytime in the near future. Of course, Mexico is an NXT for the rest of the world, and some of those guys will choose to stay there. And of course, I failed to mention how badly WWE treated handled the Mystico signing back when they did that for Sin Cara. So I don't know. I think that we're at a situation where right now Mexico is as big of a talent pool to draft from as any in the world, and I also think that's going to kind of get maxed out in the next 6 months.
I really hope that they can find a way to get Atlantis Jr. They never will. I think he's a CMLL lifer because his dad obviously was there forever. But if you can strike any kind of deal to bring him in for any length of time, I think would be a huge win, because that's the type of star in Mexico that you bring them in, then you can really expose your product. Maybe that you get an Atlantis Jr. versus Bryan Danielson. And obviously we know Danielson wants a match with the Blue Panther. But maybe that's how you make a Mexico debut, where you go down there and you have almost like an all-star festival.
The politics of CMLL and AAA make that very hard, because CMLL is very aggressive towards AAA, and they do not want people working with AAA. And AEW does a lot of work with AAA still, even after whatever happened with Triple Mania last year and all the issues and all that. Mm-hmm. I think that, honestly, short of AEW agreeing to form an exclusive relationship with CMLL and divorcing themselves from AAA, that we aren't going to see any kind of meaningful alliance. Now, could Bryan Danielson be sent down there to do a month of matches or something? Yeah, possibly. I mean, it's Bryan Danielson. He's a huge star. I think he'd be able to sweet talk his way into doing that, because Tony Khan likes making his workers happy. But there's not a 0% chance that CMLL would refuse to take Bryan Danielson because of the AAA AEW relationship. You might think that's really dumb, and it is, but that doesn't change the fact that it's true. Just because of how severe that relationship is. And so I wouldn't rule out the possibility that Bryan Danielson is clear to go to CMLL. He goes to CMLL and says, "Hey, I'd like to come work for you." And they just outright say no because of
that. I could see that, but I also think the strong relationship with AEW and New Japan, and then you have CML in there. Now, I understand the AAA connection. Look, I'm not going to speak like I'm an expert with wrestling politics in Mexico. We need to get Cubs fan on for that. And even so, I don't know if Cubs fan would be able to completely identify everything, just because it's so ingrained since the split in 1992. But I'm fantasy booking, but we can move on. Let's continue with the world of Mexico, kind of. Thunder Rosa. She says she apologized to the locker room, and the decision to keep the belt on her for so long without stripping was the decision of Tony Khan's. And it sounds like they were hoping the back injury would take, I'm extrapolating here. They're hoping the back injury would take less time to heal and they'd be able to bring her back sooner. And looks like that just wasn't the case. And we've seen that on All Access.
Yeah. I honestly have not been following All Access since the first episode, but I do know that Tony Khan recently came out and said something along the lines of Britt Baker and Thunder Rosa will never be friends. Maybe they'll be able to get to a better working relationship. That's me saying that last part. But yeah, it's a total mess, and it's very interesting to see where Thunder Rosa will slot in. I don't think she's going to not work with I don't think that it's so bad that Baker and Rosa will not work together. I think it could very easily get into a little tiffy in the ring. But that can work out really well for everyone involved. It's just, on the heels of all the CM Punk stuff, I think the situation looked a lot worse than it may have been in isolation. But when you are hearing all the CM Punk drama, then also the top stars in the women's division are having similar drama. It's not great.
No, it's not great. And Tony Khan needs to figure out how to kind of control his locker room. And I don't think
he's not a fear of God guy. He's not Vince McMahon, where people would be on eggshells all the time backstage, and still are probably, out of fear of somehow just getting dumped immediately by him. It's just a total just that situation to consider.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. Let's get some rapid fire news because we've gone almost an hour and we need to talk about this Dynamite because I'm starting to get worried. Eddie Kingston's out of action due to a hernia problem per the Wrestling Observer newsletter. He kind of said so himself as well. Likely needs surgery. Look, as somebody who had a hernia as a child and then nearly had one when my appendix exploded and almost killed me. Look, they're painful. Get it fixed. Don't blame him whatsoever. And that maybe that's a signal as to why they're continuing the storyline with Eddie Kingston and Claudio Castagnoli. So we'll see how that plays out. Andre El Idolo said for the first time since he tore his pec muscle, he's been able to do a push-up. That is a huge step in the recovery for a torn pectoral. So that could potentially mean he could be back relatively soon. Maybe he's back for Forbidden Door and you get the return of La Sombra versus somebody from New Japan. Maybe Hiromu, fantasy booking again. But that could be interesting. But the biggest news is just AEW adjacent and potentially AEW related, because I wouldn't be shocked if Will Ospreay joins this company next year. He says he has his full range of motion with his shoulder, but the strength isn't quite 100% yet. And that's significant because he is set to face Hiroshi Tanahashi at Wrestling Dontaku for in the tournament for the United States Championship that Kenny Omega currently holds. The winner of that Ospreay Tanahashi match will face Lance Archer at Dominion, and the champion, based on the posters that we've seen and the marketing material, it would be at Forbidden Door. Tanahashi broke his ribs at Capitol Collision in Washington, D.C. on April 15th. He was pulled on the road from Nantaku Tour. So a lot of injury news. But I think what was most interesting about the Ospreay stuff, Fred, is when he ended up doing, I think it was an Instagram Live, talking about his injury, talking about how he had to change his style to continue going. He's already at the age of 30, and he's like, I'm not going to be able to do this forever, and my clock is ticking, and I don't know when it's going to go. The injuries are starting to mount already. That's kind of worrisome hearing from Will Ospreay, but we need to enjoy him while we can, because this is going to go down as one of the best wrestlers the world has ever seen.
And I also think it's easy to see the changes in his style over the past 4 or 5 years, where he is really modified it and is doing less crazy stuff that will get him hurt. I think it's a pretty fair assessment that what he came to fame with in the, the Ricochet Osprey GIF match, that all the traditionalists like freaked out about. It's just a very different Osprey we have today. He's really matured as a worker. Hopefully that will help him, reduce his risk of injury, but I guess we'll just have to see.
I love Will Ospreay, and I hope he stays around forever. Will Ospreay, yeah. Sean Spears is back. He was out due to the death of his mother, and I don't remember what her non-WWE name is, but Peyton Royce, the Iconics, half of that team, gave birth to his first child. Congratulations, happy couple. And look, Sean Spears he's a Jag. He's just a guy, but he's a very good version of being a Jag. Like, yes. He's boring, but he's very solid. He's technically sound. You can beat him like a drum, and it's fine. Like, I like having Sean Spears around. It's the whole Bullet Club thing is very weird. We'll see how that ends up going.
Yeah, it's curious to see where he slots into that exactly.
But look, he's a good hand to have on the roster. All right, we're finally done with our news.
Yay!
Let's bury the hell out of this show, Fred. I want your takes, because we normally don't talk during the week about AEW, so we can have a better conversation about the show when we record, because I think that makes for a better podcast. And I believe you agree with that as well.
I do.
I'm scared this is becoming to WWE. And what was special about this promotion seems to be kind of fading away. Now, I'm not going to completely go on that train, but I'm worried. And I'm not going to necessarily blame the producer. Obviously, the production itself doesn't feel super WWE. It's what's going on camera, the storylines, how we're getting from point A to point B in those storylines. I know that this summer is big. You have to you've already sold out Forbidden Door. You have to deliver a great Supercard show. Then you have All In and All Out a week apart. Like, obviously they're saving some of the big programs and matches for those shows, but everything just outside of the Elite and Blackpool Combat Club just feels lackluster and lame. And some of it just feels super WWE, and I'm genuinely starting to get worried that it may become WWE-ish.
I gotta say, I thought the show was all right. I liked it better than last week's show. I went a 7 out of 10 on it. There was some stuff on it that I don't think worked at all, though. And I think that we need to just start here. Because all the WWE talk, and this Mike Mansouri secretly killing AEW as a secret plant from Vince McMahon. I thought that opening segment was really subpar, with the four pillars coming out to argue amongst themselves for the fourth time in the past month or whatever the hell it is. If I could go my entire life without having another one of these segments, it would be too soon. This is like the WWE style stuff that I think doesn't work. And if you had told me that they're going to do some kind of four-way feud between the pillars 2 months ago for the World Championship, I would have thought that would have been pretty cool. And I think it's lost some luster pretty quickly here.
It really has. It's not working. And you know what really pisses me off? We're going to do this little mini tournament, and MJF is teaming up with Sammy Guevara, because I think this is kind of like the Roman Reigns thing, where Roman Reigns' character is incredibly insecure, and he's not this dominant champion. MJF had to cheat to beat Ricky Starks. He had to cheat to beat Bryan Danielson. Danielson had it. And, I understand, but he's cutthroat. He's going to do whatever it takes to win. And I think what the storyline is here is he's coercing Sammy Guevara because he thinks Sammy's going to be the easiest to beat of the three of them. And he already helped him beat Jungle Boy. He's going to help him beat Darby. And I think what's going to happen is we're still going to get a four-way. I don't see this ending any other way other than a four-way match. And this whole path, the idea when they first came out after Revolution, the four pillars, okay, I can get behind this. This could be good. It's a great placeholder. You're trying to elevate these three guys, but then they put in positions where they're not ready to succeed. And for me, that's been the most frustrating part, Fred. It's not that they can't succeed with this. They haven't been put in great positions to succeed.
They're working.
To me, that rests on Tony Khan.
They're working against their strengths rather than
yes,
towards their weaknesses, which is not a good idea as a booker.
Mm-hmm. That's frustrating. And let's kind of go into this first segment, which is honestly what we're talking about. Jungle Boy walks to the ring, and then as he's about to speak, Sammy Guevara comes out, and then as Sammy starts to speak, you get Darby Allin coming out. Okay, we've seen this before. So right off the top, I'm annoyed because this happened right after Revolution. So we're already going back to the same trope within this storyline. Then after that, you're having a conversation, and then Darby cuts a babyface promo. Not emo kid Darby, not outcast Darby, not I have to work from underneath Darby. Straight up white meat babyface promo. Like, what are we doing with Darby? You're stripping everything away that made him special, that made him have this connection with the fans. Like we grew up, Fred, in this era of like, I know you're a couple years older than I am, but like mid 2000s, you had the emergence of emo culture. You had the emergence of passionate music that connected with the emotionally frustrated, angsty teen. And this character resonates with a lot of us because it reminds us of the My Chemical Romances, the Hawthorne Heights, the AFIs, and being able to connect with something that culture had never really allowed us to connect with before. It became popular. It became like Hot Topic was the store. Spencer's, like there was an acceptance of that culture, of that emotional state that a lot of teenagers go through. And Darby he's so reminiscent of that because we can connect and relate to him. And they're stripping all that away. Yeah, he has the face paint. Who gives a shit about face paint? The Ultimate Warrior had face paint. Like when they did the Hulk Hogan turn at Bash at the Beach, Macho Man Randy Savage had face paint on. Like the Sting face paint because they were facing the outsiders and it was like the team, him, Luger, and Sting. Like face paint doesn't mean much. It's what's behind it. It's the person, the persona, being able to connect with them as far as a character. And that's why Darby's become so popular. Why are they just making him like a white meat baby face? Why? Like, I hate to use this term because I just can't think of another one. They're humanizing him. And that's not the character of Darby Allin. He's a daredevil. He's an outcast. He's a loner. Like the relationship with Sting is like kind of like a bridge between the two worlds. Like I'm just so frustrated with what they're doing here with him. Jungle Boy, he's kind of in this weird ambiance where he's still a babyface, but they're trying to make him the like more of like a star. He's just not quite ready yet on the mic. And Sammy Guevara just comes off like a shitbag. Like that's his character. He's a shitbag. But this Darby stuff is so incredibly frustrating because when he eventually wins that title, which let's be honest, 3-4 years, if he's not dead or paralyzed, he's winning that belt. That's going to be a moment. But what they're doing right now, if they continue with any form of this moving forward, especially after the Sting split, because it's going to happen within a year, because Sting's going to retire. That moment is going to absolutely collapse. And it's going to be nowhere near what it could have been because you did this now. And maybe I'm overreacting. Maybe I'm going too far out on a limb. But this company, everything matters. Fans remember this stuff. And you got to be careful that you don't ruin Darby.
Yeah, and I think another issue here really is I thought Darby came off as kind of a heel with his interaction with Jack Perry. Yeah, I first of all, I just thought the whole "what are you calling yourself these days" is very cringy and does more to harm Jack Perry than get anyone else over. So miss me with that. On top of that, I don't want to see these people just bicker in the ring endlessly. Like that just sucks. Darby Allin celebrating when he's drawn to get the bye in the tournament is extremely un-Darby Allin like to me. It just felt like that's not what you should be having this guy do. He should be a guy that like wants to fight and wants to beat people. But they did that. I just think this stuff is really like kind of cutting against the characters of the baby faces, Perry and Allen. I actually think Guevara is doing pretty well in these. I don't think he's been hurt. I think he's been boosted by this more than hurt. I think that this is a dated reference because I'm an old, but I remember back in the day they had Muppet Babies. The
Muppet Babies, yeah. I love the Muppet Babies.
And the school mom or the nanny or whatever she was, it's been a long time. Like you never saw her face, and she was always positioned bigger than the Muppet Babies, and always was like the one like corralling them. And it feels like MJF is the Muppet Baby of this segment. And it's like, this is not working. It's MJF's the adult, the heel adult, but he's the heel adult, and the dumb kids are in the ring arguing, and MJF's got to come out and sort it out. And it's just like, let's not, like, we're making the main heel look like the top guy in the situation and above the challengers, and that just doesn't work. I think the tournament, I actually a week ago I would have been happier with a proper 4-way as a main event for the pay-per-view between these four. But it looks like we're going to do the tournament. I actually don't think they're going to do a 4-way now. I think it's going to be Darby Allin beating Sammy Guevara, possibly because of busted MJF interference. And I think that will actually work pretty well, but we got to get Darby. I just don't think this was a good week for Darby as far as the mic work and what they were having him do specifically. And hopefully we can just move on and avoid this nonsense and, just get back on track.
Yeah, we need to get back on track, honestly. That segment just left me so frustrated. But the next segment is a setup for something later in the show. We'll end up getting to that. AEW Women's World Champion Jamie Hayter and Dr. Britt Baker, DMD, versus the Outcasts, Ruby Soho and Toni Storm with Saraya. This ended up being a pretty decent match.
Yeah, I thought it was good.
Like, I think Saraya is getting a little bit of a bad rap. I think she's going to end up being okay. In that 3-way at the pay-per-view, she was okay. I do think that getting equipped with this house style is taking more time than some people would have liked, but I think she's going to end up being okay as a wrestler. She's never going to be great, but she's going to be capable, and she's going to be able to go with some of these other really talented women. But continuing to have her just as that scummy manager in some of these matches, I think is a really good role for her at the moment, while she continues to get more comfortable and get some of that ring rust off. But this ended up being really good, and you get a couple really good near falls with Storm Zero, and I believe it was the Haterade as well. And then Britt Baker gets Ruby Soho to tap. I can't remember what that submission is called.
The Lockjaw.
Lockjaw. And then this was a setup, and let's kind of jump forward a little bit because I want to transition right into this because they're interconnected. You had Chris Jericho and Adam Cole going face to face. Adam Cole's like, "Oh, I modeled my career after you, Chris. Adam Cole, baby, was because of you." And Chris Jericho's like, "I have no respect for you." And then they end up exchanging blows, and Britt Baker comes out to confront Chris Jericho face to face. And who's there? The Outcasts. And this is what I think is very interesting. The Outcasts end up jumping Britt Baker. They handcuff Adam Cole to the ring rope, and then they beat the living crap out of Baker. And Baker had a slip. I don't know if you caught this. On All Access, they've been referring to Adam Cole by his shoot name as well, Austin.
Mm-hmm.
She called him Austin in the ring on camera.
It's a shoot, baby.
Yep, it is a shoot. But I think what's really interesting about this is, one, they gave Baker her win in her hometown, which they always seem to do. They did it with Wardlow too, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But they also got mega heat on Jericho and the Outcast, which I think was a really smart call. And I like that these two are now loosely paired together, because the idea of the Jericho Appreciation Society is they're sports entertainers. The Outcasts are not welcome in this company. They're not from here. They're not homegrown. So essentially, you could, and especially with Saraya, sports entertainer. So I kind of like that loose affiliation here. I think it works really well.
Yeah, I don't know that we're going to see any more really, tie between the Outcasts and JAS. I think it works just fine as a one. Like, it made sense in this one circumstance. I don't know that I really want to see them tied together going forward. But I like this segment. Look, I know there's been a lot of push on the status of some AEW storylines, and I do think that there are legit things to complain about, like the 4 pillars thing is not working. I do not understand like what's been going on with Swerve Strickland at all. I thought at the beginning of the year that he could have been in the world title picture by the end of this year, if not sooner. And now, like, that momentum is gone. I think this Powerhouse Hobbs thing has been an utter flop. There's lots of stuff to complain about. I actually like this angle quite a bit. Is it WWE style? Yes, but I think that's more of a, to me, it's more of a Chris Jericho style than a, this, what, shit, I just had his name pulled up. The man, Mike Mansouri. I don't think that this is some Mike Mansouri spooky hands from up north thing. This is just, to me, an extremely Chris Jericho style angle, and I thought it was a very good one. I liked it. And if, there's probably an argument that they have too many of these types of angles going on at once, but I would not get rid of the good ones. I get rid of the bad ones. I wouldn't do this WWE style shit with 4 pillars because that's not what at least 2 of them are good at. But Adam Cole and Chris Jericho, they're good at this kind of angle, and I think this was a good storyline. We released a good angle right here for their storyline.
I'm with you. I thought it was a good storyline too, and I'm intrigued to see how this grows and develops, because I don't think this is a one-off, but I also don't know. I'm with you in that sense, where I don't know if I want to keep these 2 teams connected, but it feels to me initially like how MJF felt with the Firm. There was that loose affiliation, but it wasn't a true partnership. And I'm wondering if they kind of take the same direction initially with this.
Yeah, that will be something to watch. And, there's some reasons for them to be affiliated going forward. And, they could even set up like a mixed tag match involving Cole, Jericho, Baker, and Saraya or whoever. Now, another angle that I think really worked this week, coming off of the WWE style thing, and I think this angle is arguably a little sports entertaining, but I liked it a lot, was the Elite and Blackpool Combat Club. I thought this was a fantastic angle, and honestly, I think this is the best storyline AEW has going right now by like a good margin.
Yeah, and we'll talk about that in a little bit, but let's get back to being a little bit chronological. Renee Paquette interviewed Wardlow backstage, and this was really good because AEW doesn't forget things. I wouldn't say it's quite as cohesive as Dragon Gate, where everything does matter, but it's not quite on the same level. But Wardlow, if you remember, had affiliations with Tully Blanchard. So now he has affiliations with Arn Anderson, and they made reference of that. Like, the little things matter here, and I really appreciated it. And then Arn Anderson basically talks about how they're pulling out the big guns, the Glock, and then he uses the Glock in the match, and I thought that was really cool. But I think when we get to there, I think the how they utilized help, I think, is going to be really fascinating. But let's get to this Blackpool Combat Elite stuff, Fred. This was phenomenal. My favorite part of this was the Elite just wanted to kind of settle things. Danielson starts talking like an asshole, and the BCC blindside him. Don Callis comes out with the chair. And they're like, what are you doing with the chair? He runs back to the ring like a little bitch, and then brings out Takeshita, who's like in his socks. And I don't like, somebody said that this feels like Takeshita in the Ibushi role, and I think that's kind of right. But Callis recruiting Takeshita, and then now he's elite adjacent, I think is a great way to elevate Takeshita.
Yes.
Because what you can do is, I believe the Elite's going to end up winning this feud in the end. I do.
Yeah.
Takeshita getting the win and getting that final pinfall. And then you can use that to set up some kind of like jealousy angle with Kenny Omega and the Bucks and the Elite, because he's not really the Elite. He is Elite adjacent. Because of the Don Callis connection, then you can continue that storyline. And even though we meme Triple H for the story never ends, well, the story really doesn't end. That's kind of the whole point of professional wrestling. Like, he's saying it as a cop-out, but it's true. You go from one arc to the next. It's kind of like an anime or a soap opera in that sense. Like, you're doing one story and then transitioning into another story. It's not,
your characters evolve.
Yes, they are Pokemon. They all are.
Yeah.
Some are Rattata, some are Charizard. But yeah, I think it's really interesting how this was all intertwined. And like, you're right, this was fantastic.
I love this. When Don Callis came out, I was hooting and hollering, and then when he came back out, I hooted and hollered even more.
Yes, absolutely. I want to see where this goes. Do you think this is blood and guts? Because I have real hesitance that it is, and a lot of that comes from Kenny saying, "Oh, well, we'd like to. You'd like it if we did blood for blood, but that's your game. That's not ours." And that kind of tells me that you're maybe not heading for blood and guts, but that also could just be the beginning of like a transition to where these guys end up wanting to go blood for blood and just finishing a real blood feud in that environment.
I don't know. I don't have a solid feel for where this is going. I mean, blood and guts is an obvious option when you add up the numbers and everything. Though I do think that it'd be 4-4 now. So the numbers make sense. You could do an Anarchy in the Arena thing because yes, it was a Jericho thing at first, but I mean, obviously the Blackpool Combat Club was the other side of that, and you could just twist it into a more serious, just a whole stadium-wide brawl, which I think would be pretty awesome. I think there's a lot of options here, and I'm really curious to see which one they take because I don't have an obvious feel for which one they will be taking.
Yeah, I'm not either. That's why I love professional wrestling. There's so much we don't know. Next up, TNT Championship match that was mentioned earlier. Powerhouse Hobbs with QT Marshall versus Wardlow with the man who carries the Glock, Arn Anderson. This was good. A little too much interference for me, but the one thing that I found interesting is when QT Marshall did his interference spot, Arn Anderson kind of came out to confront him. But then we had Pentagon Jr. come out. And I thought, this is what's intriguing to me. Are we getting a new potential faction with Wardlow and the Lucha Brothers? Because that could be fun.
It could be. Maybe just a loose affiliation, but it will be something to keep an eye on for sure. I don't know, man. I'm kind of dubious because I think Wardlow works best with just loose partnerships rather than outright groups if he's being pushed as the top star, or as a future top star babyface. But yeah, I mean, it is intriguing, and unfortunately, I think this means QTV is not dead. I think that would you say that's the worst part of AEW this calendar year? There's definite recency bias here, but
the formation of QTV, where Hobbs won the title because of QTV, I think is the worst singular part of AEW this year.
I would actually argue it's been the follow-up since that. I think QTV QT Marshall as the heel manager is fine enough on its own if you're going to have Hobbs positioned as a heel. But the everything since then has sucked. I think the QTV segments, the fact that they've really put Hobbs on the back burner to feature QT Marshall, it's not working, man. It's not good.
Yeah. It's been rough. It really has been. Renee Paquette backstage to interview Sammy Guevara, and this is where we got the kind of evolution of this feud. MJF interrupted Sammy and said he had an offer for him. Offered him a blank check and a spot in the Double or Nothing main event if he promised to just lay down. Sammy smiled, wrote his price on the check, and they hugged. And Renee said, seems like a fair price to me. That's important, and we'll hold off until the main event before we kind of evolve that story. But this one was fascinating. Switchblade Jay White with Juice Robinson versus Commander. This was a very weird match, and I'll be honest, I think it delivered. This was entertaining. It was a great contrast of styles. The right man won. But let's talk about Jay White. Huge coup for AEW to get him on. Everybody thought he was going to WWE. What do you think about the presentation of Jay White so far?
Oh, buddy, I'm glad you brought this up. I don't think it's been good. I think it's been
elaborate, because
sure.
I thought the initial debut was good, but it's more about the follow-up.
It really feels like he's been slotted as a mid-carder and not a top-of-the-card star. And, I know he's feuding with Ricky Starks, which ostensibly should be like a rising star versus a new star kind of feud. But how they've been booking them with this storyline, like last week, I think Jay White got a minute on TV. And that was insane. This match, it was a good way for Jay White to, have a good match. But frankly, I thought Commander got a lot more out of it. I like this match a lot as just a, putting stars on paper kind of thing, like rating it. I thought it was a 4.25 match. Easy notebook. But I think the idea of how this match progressed, like when I finished watching the match, the performance I walked away with was Commander's and not Jay White's. And in 6 months, if this were to happen, I wouldn't think twice about it. But this was Jay White's debut match at AEW. And he took maybe 20% of it. And that's just very odd to me. Attacking Sean Spears at ringside was weird, especially when, look, he's Sean Spears. I love him. I think he's really great to have in the slot he's at, but he's Sean Spears. Can you move him up the card a little bit? Yeah, probably, but you're not going to have main event Sean Spears anytime soon. I don't think you're ever going to have that, at least not on television. Maybe Impact, I guess. I think that's a little rough to Impact. But I don't get the direction of Jay White. I would have brought in Jay White, and it would have been a big deal. It would have rearranged storylines even. And I feel like the Jay White debut has been very soft. I think he's been positioned as not a major factor when he should have been, and it's odd to me. It doesn't really make a lot of sense.
Here's kind of my take on it as my dog decides he wants to sit on a backpack because it's his dinner time and we're still recording. I get where Tony's coming from, and I'm not going to say I agree, but what it feels like to me is he doesn't have a high end, something high end for him to do. So he's positioning him with Ricky Starks.
Well, that's fine. The positioning itself is fine. Opposite Starks, I think it's everything else that has been really questionable.
I do think it's important to note that his first match got top of the hour. It got quarter hour 5. I understand they're not positioning him like a star, and I think they could be a little better than that. But I also think that it's one of those things where, and I'm just kind of rambling because I'm trying to get a coherent thought in my head, where it's recoverable. You can recover from this because of what Jay White is and how they're going to continue to push him. And obviously it's a coup for this company to have Jay White and putting him at the top of the hour in that big spot with Commander, who this could have easily gone really bad because of the clash of styles. They they delivered a very, very good TV match. And Commander really doesn't have a lot of matches. He has a lot of spot fests, and spot fests are matches. And I'm not trying to delineate those or make them feel any less than they are, but a spot fest versus something super cohesive like this is just different. And
yeah, this was very cohesive.
Like Commander's what, like 22?
He's young,
not old.
24.
Like for him to be able to draw that out of Commander, I thought was a really big seal of approval for like, hey, he's going to be fine in this American TV wrestling thing. And I mean, we saw that with Impact, but this is even more so.
Yeah, I go back to the Sammy Guevara Commander match from 2 weeks ago. Yeah, 2 weeks ago now, which I thought was fun enough, but it was also a mess of sorts because it felt very much like Commander was a video game character who just kept spamming his big rope walk moves rather than a fully cohesive match. And I thought this was a lot better in that respect. But yeah, I mean, that's kind of my take on it. I thought it was a really fun match. I thought it was structured really well, and I liked how it went.
Mm-hmm. It's going to be interesting to see how this continues. Obviously, Sean Spears was ringside holding up like number signs because he's a former 10 guy. It gave me NBA All-Star Game dunk contest vibes with how he was doing the numbers. But it was initially like, hey, is Spears going to be the next Bullet Club guy? Spears was not impressed with Jay White. Juice Robinson pulls Spears over the barricade. They swarm him. And then this was interesting. Absolute Ricky Stark sprints down. He ducks a clothesline from Jay White and immediately dives into a sick looking spear on Juice Robinson. Jay White, being the smarmy heel he is, gets out of the ring. It feels like we're going to get 2-on-2 tag at some point down the line, maybe next week, with Jay White and Juice Robinson, Bullet Club Gold versus Ricky Starks and Sean Spears.
You know, I think I talked a little bit about Action and Ready not too long ago, but I think he's been supplanted by Sean Spears, which is not a good sign for him at all.
Yeah, whatever. I'm holding off on Action and Ready. That's a weird deal. We're about to hear from FTR with Renee Paquette when they told FTR that Mark Briscoe had been attacked early in the night. This ended up leading to a video package with Mark Briscoe and both. I don't know. Sanjay Dutt's little group, Jay Lethal, Jeff Jarrett, Satnam Singh.
They need a name. I wish they had a name just for our purposes.
Yeah, we're gonna call them Jeff Jarrett's lackeys. But it's we found out that it was the varsity athletes that ended up and Slim J that were attacking Mark Briscoe. So Rampage is gonna have Jeff Jarrett, Jay Lethal, and FTR versus the varsity athletes and Slim J. Sounds like that this may be a tag title program, which I think could be fun. It keeps things off of
the Acclaimed.
Yeah, it also keeps some of the bigger money programs for down the line. I still think you should belt up Jeff Jarrett, but I don't think they're going to do it because I think they have plans for FTR to really enhance this title reign.
Yeah, and I think that time has passed for peak Jeff Jarrett AEW champion after they lost the 4-way, to be honest.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm kind of with you there. But now we get the Acclaimed Anthony Bones, Max Caster, and Daddy Ass Billy Gunn versus Cool Hand Ange, Daddy Magic, and Jake Hager. The Acclaimed lose. They have to join JS until Double or Nothing. Well, they didn't. The Acclaimed wins. I don't know where the hell this goes from here, but this kind of.
I hope that's it. I hope this is it. This was a complete house show, like piss break match. Just missed me with this.
It sucked. Now we have the Four Pillars tournament as Darby Allin early in the show ended up getting a bye until next week in Miami. So it's Spanish God Sammy Guevara with Tay Mello versus Jungle Boy Jack Perry. This was a good match. So the finish, we have to talk about that because that's honestly the big story behind the match. They're out. Jungle Boy gets pushed onto a table where he hits the table like cheek first, and he's
that looked rough.
out. Yeah, it was a cool looking bump, but it looked like it hurt like hell.
Yeah.
At about 7, Sammy Guevara ends up like grabbing Bryce Remsburg because Bryce Remsburg can be manipulated like that. And MJF comes out and hits Jungle Boy with the Dynamite Diamond, jumps and hides behind the barricade. Sammy gets Bryce to restart the count of 10. And at 9, 10, and boom, Sammy Guevara wins by count out with outside interference from MJF. This is like, we saw the earlier segment, and then we saw this. And now next week, I think he's going to beat Darby Allin with some similar bullshit. And I think this is why it's still going to end up a 4-way.
See, I think you've got to have Darby beat Guevara just for the sake of it. Making. I think if you have Darby lose, then I think you might actually risk the crowd turning on this completely. I just think that would work terribly. But yeah. Yeah, this was a finished match. I liked the work in the match. I thought they were having a pretty good match, and then I thought the finish was pretty damn flat.
Yeah, the finish was pretty flat. Kind of is what it is at this point. We'll see how this goes, but that's Dynamite.
Solid in the ring, some very good angles and some not very good angles at all. So
I gave the show a 5 out of 10. I didn't like it, but
that's fair.
I also think that a 5 out of 10 is kind of on like a Dynamite scale because we've been super, super spoiled with this company. We've been this company's been so phenomenal with television, and this has kind of been a down point. And will this continue? I don't know, but this is. I mentioned this in our office Slack. Like, this is the least I've been invested in Dynamite since the company started. And I don't know how much of it is just because I'm so ingrained in my NFL draft stuff, or it's the storylines, or honestly both. But I wasn't alone in that sentiment.
No, and grain of salt and all that, because cage match is fun to look at, and I think it means something, but I don't think it means like everything, right?
Yeah.
I went back and I looked at the show ratings on cage match for Dynamite, and I think part of the problem here is we're coming off of what might have been the greatest run in American TV wrestling history, from November 23rd, from basically the Thanksgiving Dynamite until February 8th, so the championship fight night. Every Dynamite on cage match has at least a 7.6 rating in that stretch, and that's a stretch of 8, 10, 12 Dynamites. Where the worst one was, like a 4-star show, basically, if you're going by that scale. You've got, of those 12, 10 of them were 8+, and it also included a 9.10. So, like, basically one of the best episodes of wrestling TV ever, with that the Escalera de la Muerte Elite Death Triangle match as the main event. And since then, we have had in the I'm not going to do the Joe Lanza counting because doing my own thing here, but in the 10 Dynamites since that streak, we have had 3 under 7, 4 under 7, 1 at a 4.73, 1 at 5.74. Now there's been some high points like the Elmont, New York, Long Island show was 8.71 on there. There's a couple of the Independence, Missouri, and the Winnipeg ones were both about 8.2. But it has been a long time since you go back through these numbers and see like a stretch of like under 8s, even like that. I think you basically, for this kind of, this common of a under 7 show on cage match, you have to go back to the start of maybe the start of 2022, but honestly closer to the summer 2021 when it was the pandemic still in Jacksonville with the Friday Night Dynamites.
Oh, the Friday Night Dynamites. I'm glad those aren't still around. I hated those. They drove me bonkers. Look, and you know what? Maybe it's just because we do this show and we analyze it and we become a little overcritical on some things, and maybe that's why I'm just a little down. But I still think a 5 out of 10 is still a fine wrestling show. Like,
but for a Dynamite, that's a disappointment.
It's a major disappointment.
Mm-hmm.
Like, a really good Raw might get a 6 or 7 out of 10. Like, so in context, I guess it's fine, but I just didn't love this. Like, and it's fine. Like,
I went 7 out of 10 on it.
Yeah.
Next Dynamite hopefully will be a lot better. I will say that I like the sum of the part, I like the individual parts more than the sum. The inverts of that cliche. I thought there was some pretty good stuff on here. I thought there were 4 matches that were at least like notably good. I thought there was a notebook match. I thought there were 2 very good angles. So like looking at it like that, I thought that parts of the show were very entertaining. I think that it's totally fair though to have some criticism of the overarching stuff going on in the company though. And I think if you want to go harsher on the score, I definitely don't have a problem with that.
Yeah. Well, Fred, that is our show.
I do want to work in one thing real quick here. Because frankly, we've been harsh on Taya Valkyrie since she came in and how we didn't want to see her. And I would probably give a fair bit of this credit to Emi Sakura, but I thought their Rampage match last Friday was actually like very solid. I liked it. It was like a 3.5 star match to me. And look, if I'm going to shit on Taya Valkyrie, I'm going to give her credit too. And I thought she did a very good job in that match. And for the first time in her entire AEW run, I was like, all right, let's go. I'm happy she's here.
Yeah. If she performs like that, it's going to be really hard to be mad about the signing. But we've seen so much data saying that she's not that good.
Yeah. But, give her credit for this one. So.
Oh, anybody who delivers should get credit. But we'll see. Yeah, that's our show. We will be back in some form next week. Hopefully, I will be able to have time to join, but next week is probably my busiest week of the year with the NFL draft coming up and everything that I have going on. So, at the very least, you'll have Fred. Hopefully, it will be a full show. But we'll see. With my wife out of town, I have all the time in the world to get whatever I want done without having to really worry about anything else, which will definitely help for me being on the show, but we'll kind of see. You'll get something from us. We promise you that. You can follow us on Twitter at goodbadhungee. You can email the show at hungeepod.com. You can ask us questions via the Discord, email, or by DMing either of us on Twitter. I am at The Real Forno, and Fred is at Flagrant Wrestling with an R. And as we end the show, we do have a question that we honestly should have answered when we talked about the Tony Khan potentially making his own version of the WCW Luchadors. From Evil Trident on the Discord. How long until Commander and El Hijo del Vikingo stop being cool on TV? And why is it never? Because they have a La Parka LA Park phase.
Look, I think they're both very talented workers. I think Commander has some stuff to improve on, but I think it's pretty promising. And I think Vikingo's already there. So, I'm happy with, I think they're great. And I think that they're great additions.
Yeah, I think so too. It's going to be very interesting to kind of see how everything plays out. I'm very high on both these guys. I don't think they'll stop ever being cool unless they can't do the flippy do stuff that they do. But I will say, appreciate it, because after 2 years of seeing it, you're going to become less appreciative of it. So just don't stop appreciating how incredible they are. That's my best advice.
And there's already talk out there about how Vikingo's beat up. So, I remember when Barbaro Cavernario was on the up and getting a lot of praise and also criticism for his dives to the floor and stuff, splashes to the floor, I should say. So just keep that in mind.
Yeah. I think Vikingo just might need to take a little bit of a break for a month because the last few weeks he's just been going 1,000,000 miles an hour and he's been great, but it's professional wrestling, not baseball. That takes a really big toll on your body, especially when you're doing all the flippy-do stuff Vikingo does. But that is our show. Make sure if you are listening on the Voices of Wrestling podcast feed, thank you very much. But if you want to continue to support the show, please go subscribe to our solo feed. And there also, something we've never mentioned before, there is a spot. If you go to our page on Red Circle, our show page, there's a spot for donations. If you want to throw us a couple extra bucks because you think we're really cool, you can also do that for Fred on his Patreon, where he puts some really interesting deep dive stuff. Until then, this is The Good, the Bad, and the CM Punk. Have a great day.
Take it easy.
Cheering at pro wrestling shows in Japan is back, and 2023 is already shaping up to be a big year in the history of pro res. That's why you should listen to the Emerald Flow Show. From the Royal Road to the Green Mat, Paul and Gerard take you into the world of All Japan Pro Wrestling and Pro Wrestling Noah. Not only do we analyze events, but we examine business, who is getting over, what angles are working or not. Occasionally, we take a look at other Japanese promotions like DDT and Zero One. So if you're looking for more coverage of the world of Japanese wrestling, check out the Emerald Flow Show on the Voices of Wrestling Podcast Network, available on all of your favorite podcast apps.
Hey everybody, my name is Jesse Collins, and I want to tell you all about my show, the Gentleman's Wrestling Podcast, here on the Voices of Wrestling Podcast Network. On the Gentleman's Wrestling Podcast, we do a thorough analysis on the biggest issues and trends within the pro wrestling industry. We talk a lot about pro wrestling media, we talk a lot about fan culture and wrestling's place within general pop culture, and we talk about the broader influences that are shaping the way we discuss and analyze the pro wrestling industry. We've had some of the brightest minds in the pro wrestling intelligentsia on the show, including WrestleNomics host Brandon Thurston, both Rich Craich and Joe Lanza from the Flagship Wrestling Podcast, Trevor Dame from the Through the Years podcast, and a whole lot more. This isn't a show for hot takes. It's not a show recapping the latest episode of television. This is a show focusing on the biggest topics in pro wrestling and doing a deep dive on the real stories behind the surface level analysis you might find elsewhere. The Gentleman's Wrestling Podcast is available wherever you get your podcasts, and we'd really appreciate it if you gave us a try. Thanks.